Okay, so I don't know if you guys know the band The Dirty Projectors, but one of their most popular songs has a lyric in the opening part where they talk about a defining feature of being a child is having no habits. A couple years ago, I was listening to that song with a coworker, and in a moment of self reflection, decided that I was like the child they were talking about. I had no habits, or at least none that I had intentionally decided to take on in adulthood. Why didn't I have habits? Well, it's because I had a totally illogical attitude. I thought habits were boring, and people who did them were lame and wanted to be predictable. I was not like that. I was creative and free thinking and adventurous, and also terribly inefficient because I was reinventing the wheel every single day. I sit before you today to tell you that performing habits does not make you a boring robot who's programmed out of their own individual thought. Habits can actually make your life better while freeing up space to think about more interesting stuff. And you can totally adopt habits. And so, I present to you 4 tips on forming strong foundational habits to enhance your life. Tip number 1, start small. The idea is to get in the practice of intentionally adding something to enhance your life. You practice this something so many times that it becomes ingrained in you, and you no longer have to expend mental energy and willpower on making the something happen. It just naturally does. 2 small habits that I've tackled this way are making my bed every morning and flossing every night before I go to bed. Once you've got a couple of these small things incorporated into your life consistently, you can then take the same mindset that you use to adapt them and direct it towards something a little bit bigger, and then just chip away at it until that becomes a habit also. Habit forming tip number 2, add one thing at a time. I used to try to do New Year's resolutions with a list of things I wanted to change in like 8 areas of my life, and then create goals for all of them. I think a lot of people try this approach of like resetting your life on January 1st or whatever arbitrary date. And at least for me, that's always been a recipe for failure, where I fall down flat on my face out a few days or weeks in, and then it's all over and everything is back to how it was before. Instead of this life overhaul and collapse method, I suggest trying to simply choose one something to tackle incorporating into your life, and then work on just that one habit for some period of time, maybe a month. Check in with yourself periodically after that and evaluate whether you feel like that habit has been successfully adopted before tackling the next one. It's true that this takes longer than a plan where you can change 8 areas of your life overnight, but it's also how you can actually make meaningful changes to the way you operate that become part of you for the long term. So stick with it, one thing at a time. Which brings us to tip number 3 for creating strong foundational habits to enhance your life. Be persistent and adaptive. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's totally possible that your new life-changing habit isn't going to stick with you the first cycle of you trying to incorporate it, or maybe not the second or the fifth. I don't want to minimize the accomplishment of bed making or water drinking, but I found those to be much easier to incorporate for me than, say, eating 3 healthy meals a day that I cook for myself at home. In the example of the more difficult to adopt habit, I think about it more in terms of every day that I do eat three healthy meals that I made for myself is a win. And it's building up the practice so it takes less time for me to do more often. Also, a note on being adaptive. I found that different adoption methods work better for me than with different habits than others. For example, for flossing, I've been doing the don't break the streak method, where you just start doing a habit regularly and keep track of the fact that you've done it however many days in a row. For me, for flossing, the idea of that streak being broken and reset to 0 helps motivate me when I'm feeling particularly lazy at night. On the other hand, I'm pretty good at exercising regularly, but I think if I tried to keep a streak going with that officially in my head, it would stress me out. So be experimental and adaptive. And it just may be that a method that helps you to adopt one habit might not work on another, or vice versa. And finally, tip number 4, reflect on your progress and celebrate your success. So if you get in the habit of adopting new habits, it can be easy to get in the mindset of moving on to your next challenge and getting wrapped up in tracking your progress on the new thing without giving yourself credit for the successes you've already had. Make sure you pause at times to think back to where you were 1 month or 6 months or however long ago and appreciate the progress that you've already been able to make. I find that this is more than just a pat on the back thing, but actually helps me with the current issue at hand as well, because I'm like, whoa, there was a time I was putting effort into that small thing that I now do automatically. And in a few months, it's totally possible that I'll be looking back on this habit that I'm trying to adopt today the same way. It's a positivity cycle. So that's it. Just 4 tips for you today. And to sum up my thoughts, habits are not just for lame people. The feeling of choosing to incorporate something into your life is super powerful, and you can absolutely do it by being persistent and taking it one day at a time. Good luck. If you want to share tips that have worked for you, or tell me I'm wrong, or ask questions, go to the comments. Um, get out there and start trying to do something. Bye.